back to Darius, he tells in his account of a war not involving disputing gods and mythological powers of incredible feats, at least to the extent Homer does. Well, is it Homer? Who knows? Feats such as Aphrodite, who Paris chose during his judgment of the goddesses, who appears during Paris and Menelaus' duel of single combat, out of nowhere to transport Paris in a cloud of smoke away from the battlefield and back to his chambers in Troy. The version by Darius gives great description of the battles and the men who fought in them, even discussing how the aforementioned Aeneas, grandfather of Brutus, survived the epic siege. I recommend reading his works, even if only for comparison to Homer's versions of events alone. Could the date and location of the Trojan War be wrong? Could there have been 2 Trojan Wars? Well, let us start to unpack the Homeric poems and see what we can extrapolate, starting with the climate and geography. The climate of eastern England in the northwest of Europe has a differing climate to that of Anatolia in southwest Turkey, the far eastern end of the Mediterranean. To start off, Homer mentions the torrential rain that often accompanied the warring soldiers on the battlefield. He used a very intriguing word to describe the rains, athefastos. Sorry, some of these words are so difficult to pronounce. Athefastos, which translates generally into the phrase, "what even a god cannot measure." This indicates never-ending and persistent rainfall, which is typical of the climate of the North Atlantic regions, both in Europe and across the Atlantic in North America. The climate in Anatolia, however, has more random rains, brought about by sudden shifts in temperature and pressure. One might expect to find an adjective such as sudden, or a phrase coined more along the lines of, "when a god felt the need, it rained," or something of that ilk, rather than a reference to constant heavy rains. Homer mentions how Zeus had a hand in the weather, and I quote now, "Zeus rained ever continually, that the sooner he might whelm the wall in salt and sea," unquote. That was in the Homeric poems, by the way. The thick mists mentioned also by Homer is another indicator of a more temperate climate, which can be found in the famous British countrysides. Known for its foggy and rainy days, whilst the mention of strong northerly winds with cold weather and the falling of ice and snow is indicative of the northerly weather systems pushing down the North Sea, or as someone like Imam Wilkins would say, the Hellas Sea. Strong northerly winds can also be found at Hisarlik, situated at the Dardanelles, yet nowhere in the Iliad does it make reference to a Mediterranean climate of warmer temperatures and arid soil, which can be observed in southwest Turkey. He simply does not mention in the Iliad. There's people who've made assumptions and things like that, but if you read the poems, there's absolutely no mention of this arid climate. Here are a couple of quotes from Homer himself. "Now, when they were marshalled, the several companies with their captains, the Trojans, came on with a clamour and a cry like birds, even as the clamour of cranes arises before the face of heaven, when they flee from wintry storms and merciless rains, and with a clamour fly towards the streams of the ocean. A mist that a shepherd loves not, but that to the robber is better than night, and a man can only see as far as he can cast a stone." So as you see there, torrential heavy rains and thick fogs. You can only see as far as you can throw a stone, unquote, / quote, unquote. Certain references to plants and trees are littered throughout the Iliad, whilst ash, elm and oak trees can be found in varying climates. The beech, black poplars and willow trees are found in more temperate environments, generally requiring deep, moist soil, and as such can be found along the rivers and near lakes, of the more temperate zones of northwest Europe. Homer also mentions thick turf, which I presume is grass, to be honest, which is not usually associated with warmer climates in the Mediterranean. Great fields of wheat, lush flowering meadows and orchards, as well as springs, are described, which sounds like an area lush in vegetation. There is mention of various dikes also in the Iliad, of which are rather rare in ancient Greece, but can be found all over the low-lying lands in northwestern Europe, used for diverting rainfall and also protection, in warfare that is, not just from the elements, but from raiding enemies. Homer calls these dikes the splendid work of young men, unquote. The Roman philosopher Strabo, claiming, I quote, that the floods in Europe are the cause of more deaths than war. So water was obviously with the flooding and things like that, rivers bursting and all this kind of stuff, the low-lying lands were susceptible for a lot of fatalities. There are also a huge number of Iron Age dikes to be found across eastern England dating back to the Iron Age. The most notorious of these dikes goes by the name Devil's Dyke, which is a great war dike. Devil's Dyke is the remains of a prehistoric defensive ditch which lies at the east side of the village of Wheathampstead in Hertfordshire, England. It is protected as a scheduled monument and is alleged to have been part of the defences of an Iron Age settlement belonging to the Catuvellauni tribe of Britain. This is the largest of the war dikes to be found, but is one of many. The plain on which the armies seized each other up and the battles took place will be discussed later during the archaeological research segment. Apologies, I am tripping over my tongue left, right and centre here. I'm just still not with it, am I? I will just say briefly that many today imagine the walls of Troy to be high and thick stone walls, when in fact Homer only makes one reference to the walls of the conflict, in which he uses the term dikes of battle. So just think about that. We all think of the movie, probably in the mind's eye. You think of all the archers on the wall and, Hector and the Trojans out front. But there's no reference to this great wall. Quote, even beneath Agamemnon, son of Atreus, fell the heads of the Trojans as they fled, and many horses with high arched backs rattled empty cars over the dikes of battle, lacking their peerless charioteers, who were lying on the ground, dearer far to the vultures than their wives, unquote. So you had masses of chariots riding over the war dikes without charioteers, where they'd fell off and been shot or things like that. And to be honest, we shall discuss horses and chariots later, which is, you'd be surprised, to be honest, some of the information there. Quoting Homer again now, so they took their stand in the flowery mead of Scamander, numberless as are the leaves and the flowers in their season, even as their generations of leaves, such as those also of men. As for the leaves, the wind scattereth some upon the earth, but the forest putteth forth others. When the season of spring is come, even so of men, one generation spring up, and another passeth away. For he stormed across the plain like unto a winter torrent at the full, that with its swift flood sweeps away the embankments. This the close fenced embankments hold not back, neither do the walls of the fruitful vineyards and orchards stay it sudden when the rains of Zeus driveth it on. And before it in multitudes the fair works of men fell in ruin. Even in such wise before Troy, Tydeus' son, were the thick battalions of the Trojans driven out, unquote. Here is a quote from the Celtic bard Taliesin regarding the Celtic struggle with surging waters and things like that, and I quote, "The storm raged for 4 nights in the summer, then men fell, and the woods themselves were no longer any protection against the winds from the sea. Math and Heved, masters of magic and wand, had liberated the elements. The Gwydion and Amethion held council. They made a shield so strong that the sea could not engulf the best troops." It's interesting that he makes reference there, that was unquote by the way, Math and Heved, masters of magic and wand, makes me think of Merlin, makes me think of Celtic sorcery, you know, rather than, I've never heard any Greek or anyone over in Greece actually having a magic wand, you know, maybe Hermes, he has a Odeyseus, but that's about it. The Scamander River mentioned by Homer could potentially be the River Ouse, as we shall see, which is a powerful river located on the side of the plains and battlefield laid between the city of Troy and the coastal encampment to which the ships were rested. The River Ouse has several other rivers that feed into it and is prone to seasonal flooding due to the heavy rainfall that can turn the river into a muddy torrent of great force, sweeping away all in its path. The strong shield against the sea, according to Imman, sounds like a water dike protecting the soldiers, which is a familiar sight of the 20th century, when dikes were erected on the River Thames in England and the Schelde in Holland, designed to protect the riverbanks when storms swell and the water levels rise. Speaking of rivers, rivers are the ancient highways, and in most cases, just like lakes, they carry their original names in one form or another, depending on etymological evolution in areas of the said bodies of water. Homer happens to mention 9 rivers in the Iliad, of which all can be placed in the region of Troy of eastern Britain. I shall share a couple of these river names and their evolution to modern names in no particular order. I shall use the Greek words first and then use the usual etymological render and finally the modern name. First is the river Kares, that's K-R-E-S, then Keres, which you replace the K with a C, later then back to Kares with the K in the Middle Ages, and today Kares is known today as just Car, C-A-R, or otherwise known as Karsdyke. So the K or the C and the A and the R has survived where the ES has been removed. Next up is the Axi, A-X-I, rendered to Axi, and today known as Exi, E-X-E. The X remaining steadfast through the ages. Finally, we shall look at the Ouse, or salamander of the Iliad, oldest name being Santi Ois to Santi Ois, known today as Little Ouse. The evolution is clear in the wording of all 9 rivers, and to be honest, like I say, this came from this book, Imman Wilkins, and I'd advise anybody to purchase this book. It's not the easiest book to get your hands on, if I'm being honest. This was the last copy available on Amazon at the time when I purchased it. There might be more available now, so hopefully you can all have a little look into that yourselves.